For me, I didn't really have any of my own memories. I know Dad through other people's stories.
She made her father missing the most important fact of her life. And I think she's emblematic of many, many others that went through the same thing.
In part one of this two-part series, we explored how families navigate the system designed to find America's missing warriors. We heard about one family's decades-long effort to get answers, the bureaucratic machinery that provided both support and frustration, the private researchers who stepped in to help, and the obstacles that continue to complicate existing cases.
They wanted to use American prisoners or their remains or their personal effect as bargaining chips, either after the war politically, diplomatically, or after the war economically.
For nearly 1,600 MIA families, the story continues.
Well, I think that what had been my biggest hope became my biggest fear, and that he was alive in captivity for over 20 years, feeling betrayed by his country and forgotten by his daughter. That terrified me.
Stick around. From the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, founders of The Wall, this is Echoes of the Vietnam War. I'm your host, Michael Crone, bringing you stories of service, sacrifice, and healing from people who still feel the impact of that conflict more than 50 years later. Episode 104, The Fullest Possible Accounting, Part 2. Right after this.
Hi, I'm Anne Margaret. I went to Vietnam to entertain the troops in 1966 and 1968. My guys, my gentlemen, if you lived through the Vietnam War era, you know the impact that the war had. But today, we are in danger of history being lost. Current generations know very little about the war, or the people who served. As more of our Vietnam vets pass away each day, their stories are being lost to history. Together, we can change that. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund is the organization that built the wall. It works to ensure that future generations will understand the war's impact. Let's help keep the promise that the wall was built on. Never forget. Visit vvmf.org to find out how you can get involved.
May 27, 2024. It's a rainy spring day at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. A man stands with his back to the wall, facing a large audience gathered under open umbrellas.
I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. And on behalf of the board, the staff, the volunteers, I'd like to welcome you to the annual Memorial Day observance at the Wall. This month marked the 49th year since the last American casualties in the Vietnam War. Yet for some families, those years didn't bring closure as they waited for their family and friends. I call your attention to the empty chair here as a symbol of the 1,576 Americans who still remain missing or unaccounted for from the Vietnam War. Yet in remembering them, we must all recognize that we shall not rest until there is the fullest possible accounting of those who remain missing from the war.
As this part of the ceremony demonstrates, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial isn't just a monument cast in granite. It's a living document that continues to change as the story of the Vietnam War continues to unfold. Here's Jim Knotts.
When you go to the wall and you look at all of the 58,281 names, you're going to see a symbol beside every single name. Now, there are two primary symbols. It is a diamond and a cross symbol that looks like a plus sign. The diamond is the one that you'll see most often, and it indicates that that person is known dead, or based on the circumstances around their disappearance, they were presumed dead at the time. But then you also have the cross symbol plus sign. That means that person's status is still unknown, and we really don't know what exactly happened to them. There was a third symbol that was conceived, and that was to be used in the case of someone who was missing, who returned home alive. And the status symbol would be the plus symbol or the cross symbol with a circle around it representing the circle of life for anyone who returned home alive. Unfortunately, that symbol has never been used on the wall. We've made it our tradition that during this Memorial Day ceremony each year, we read any names the Pentagon has approved to be added to the memorial and the names of the missing who were repatriated last year. As you are able, please stand. I will now read the names of the 4 service members whose remains were found, identified, and repatriated in 2023. Ralph J. Chipman, Captain, United States Marine Corps. Ernest L. DeSoto, Colonel, U.S. Air Force. Ronald W. Forrester, Captain, United States Marine Corps. Frederick M. Hall, Captain, U.S. Air Force. I'm sure you'll all join me when I say, welcome home. Please be seated.
When the wall was dedicated, there were 1,256 crosses. Today, about 700 remain.
But what we do almost every year when the Pentagon identifies remains, and we call that repatriation, we know that they have returned home. They give us the list, and we actually have our stone artisan go to the wall and superimpose a diamond over top of the cross of that person. So their symbol literally changes from a plus sign or a cross symbol to a diamond, saying their status is no longer unknown. We know that they died.
Granite is known for its durability. It's harder than marble. But changing those symbols is a delicate process that requires extraordinary precision and perfect timing.
The stone is sensitive enough that we have to wait until weather conditions allow to make these dramatic kinds of changes in the face of the stone without causing damage. That usually means the temperatures have to be within a certain range that we don't see in Washington, D.C. until early May. And so that's how you can see that that part of the story has evolved and it has changed over time. The trend the last couple of years is 4 or 5 names every year. Just this past year, there were 4 names that we had to go and check out. There were 4 repatriations last year.
Among those 4 was Marine Captain Ron Forrester. His daughter, Karen E. Forrester, who spent decades searching for answers about her MIA father, watched his status get updated from a distance, just a few days before Jim Knotts read Forrester's name at the wall. But, thanks to another Gold Star daughter, Karen E. felt like she was there.
And I found out that the change was going to happen just a couple of days before it was going to take place. And it was happening the Thursday in advance of Memorial Day weekend. So about 10 days before Memorial Day. there was no way I could make it to DC and then keep all my other commitments. And so Colleen Shine, dear friend of mine also, an MIA daughter, her father's been recovered, and she's very active in many different groups.
If the name Colleen Shine rings a bell, it may be because she was featured in episode 26 of this podcast. Her story highlights the stark difference between the finality of killed in action and the uncertainty of missing in action.
My name is Colleen Shine. I'm the daughter of Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shine, an Air Force fighter pilot missing in action in the Vietnam War for 24 years.
And your father was one of 4 siblings who served in Vietnam.
Right. My father's younger brother was killed in action in October of 70 in Vietnam. My dad was on his first tour of action then, and he flew his brother's body back home for burial, stood vigil the night before the funeral, and then returned to his job in Vietnam. I was 6 when my Uncle John was killed in action.
And do you have any memory of your family receiving that news?
I have the memory of my mom telling me that it had happened and the finality of death. And then the next memory connected to that was the difference of being sat down and told your dad is missing. And he could be dead, and I knew dead was never coming back. But he could not be, and he might be coming back. John was the first loss I had had in my very young life. And I guess the way that my mom said it was enough to let me know she meant never. He wasn't on a mission he was going to return from. And so that was just really sad.
MIA families are members of a tight community. Kearney reached out to Colleen, who lives in Arlington, Virginia, and asked for a favor.
I asked her, could you maybe get there? And not only did she get there, but she set it up with a, Teams meeting so that I could be there and watch as they changed the status for both my dad's pilot and then for my father. And I was able to talk with the VVMF rep that was there, explaining to me just the care that was being taken. You would think it doesn't take that long to just go do a little dot there, but that's not the process. And really getting to understand what is the process for changing any engraving on that beautiful monument there, that memorial. And, there were, of course, people there on tours, and Colleen would explain to them what was happening, and his daughter's on the phone. And so I very much felt like I got to be there and got to be part of it. And she got rubbings for both myself and my pilot's family of what it looks like now. And it was just special to know that it was done and completed before Memorial Day, when Dad would be having quite a few visitors.
Kearney's story, told fully and brilliantly by Josh Alvarez at Texas Monthly, has become a symbol of hope for other MIA families. But that hope sometimes brings its own burden.
But I also know what it feels like to live with, how do I resolve within myself that I might not get an answer? And that's not easy. And I think that's why we say the fullest possible accounting, because we know that it won't be a complete accounting. And I know families who, even if they just had information that resolved within themselves that their loved one died in the incident, even if they don't get remains back, maybe that is the best that they're going to get, and that's something. But for families that need to know what happened to their loved one, and that's the majority of it, we'd rather live with hope than with defeat, because I think those are the only 2 options. If I had come to a point where I just said, all right, that's it, I'm done, I can't take it anymore, I would have walked away defeated. And I don't want anyone to feel that way. So if your options are hope or defeat, I pick hope. I choose hope every day.
We'll be right back. Stick around. If you're enjoying Echoes of the Vietnam War, I want to let you know about some very easy ways you can help to support the podcast. Here are 3 ideas ranked from easiest to hardest, and the hardest is still pretty easy. Number 1, spread the word. Tell a friend or 2 friends, or better yet, share a favorite episode on your social media accounts so you can let all of your friends know in one go. Number 2, leave us a review or a rating wherever you get your podcasts. Even if you stream Echoes directly from our website, you can still send feedback through the form at the bottom of the page. Number 3, if you're listening from our website, consider following or subscribing on one of the many platforms where podcasts are found, including Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and many more. That way, you'll always have the most recent episode automatically downloaded to your mobile device, and you'll boost our subscription numbers, which will help new listeners find us more easily. Thank you so much for just listening. We really appreciate your continued attention to these stories. We'll be extra grateful for your help in spreading the word about Echoes so more people can check out the work we're doing. Let's talk about the wall for a minute. It is widely considered to be the memorial that changed memorials forever. Its design invites a level of engagement, of introspection, of reverence that no fountain, no statue of a cannon or a man on a horse could ever match. The volunteers who work there often talk about wall magic, that unexpected, often spiritual connection or discovery that happens when you visit the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It's one of the reasons why the wall's design has inspired so many other memorials around the world. Of course, there is one little problem with the wall's design. 140 panels of polished black granite aren't exactly portable. So, unless you can get yourself to Washington, D.C., how are you supposed to experience wall magic for yourself? Well, guess what? We already thought of that. In 1996, VVMF unveiled an exact replica of the wall that could be packed into an 18-wheeler and hauled to cities and towns all across America. Since then, the wall that heals has been displayed in more than 800 communities throughout the nation, spreading the healing legacy of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial to millions of visitors. Sure, there are other versions of the wall that travel around the country, but the wall that heals is the only one that is an exact replica of the one in Washington, created and maintained by the same organization that built the wall in the first place. And not only that, the wall that heals is accompanied and curated by VVMF employees who work with host communities to ensure that the experience is as close as possible to the real thing. And that includes wall magic. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can check out episode 15 of this podcast to learn what happens to people's hearts when this traveling exhibit rolls into a real-life American community. The Wall That Heals and the mobile education center that travels with it will be in Orange, California, October 2 through 5, and Clovis, California, October 9 through 12. To see the rest of this year's tour schedule and to learn how you can bring the Wall That Heals to your town, visit vvmf.org. The phrase "fullest possible accounting" acknowledges a difficult reality. Some questions may never be answered. But behind the diplomatic language lies a more troubling question. How much information exists that hasn't been shared? Dr. Jay Veit's research for the National League of Families of American Prisoners and Missing in Southeast Asia asserts that the Vietnamese government is withholding vast amounts of valuable information about missing Americans precisely because it is valuable. In a report published in June of this year, Jay documents the systematic collection of American materials by the North Vietnamese during the war. You can find the full report on the League's website, but here's an excerpt. Quote, "The failure of the 1968 Tet Offensive, the American decision to halt the bombing of North Vietnam, and the opening of peace discussions in Paris enabled the General Political Department to issue a new directive that stressed the importance of museum operations and tradition building. The directive ordered the Army to motivate everyone to identify, collect, select, preserve, and protect original or exemplary historic items, and to fully and meticulously record everything about the item and the historic significance. It was critical to exploit these historic items to support our political and ideological requirements. Every unit, from the military region headquarters down, must have an officer who is specifically responsible for museum activities. Also, periodic military reports on political activities must include a section on the unit's museum activities." One can argue how well this directive was carried out by units under combat conditions, but there can be no doubt that the People's Army, from the region to the company level, had been ordered by the highest political organization in the military to collect, record, and report on recovered American materials. End quote. Recent events support Jay's assertion. In 2023, during President Biden's visit to Vietnam, officials provided identification materials from American servicemen lost decades ago, some in pristine condition, including ID cards from a 1961 crash in Laos. And evidence of systematic Vietnamese collection continues to emerge. As recently as 2024, an American MIA advocate discovered a U.S. identification card on display at a Vietnamese provincial museum, belonging to someone DPAA lists as non-recoverable. Jay spoke with me about this via Zoom from his home in Columbia, Maryland.
One of the things your listeners have to know is that the communists have published extensively on the war. I mean, an incredible amount of official histories, unit histories, primary source publications from their own archive, an enormous amount of material that almost the very, very few Western scholars are aware of. Now, DPA is aware of some of this information, air defense histories, unit histories, things like that, memoirs, things like that. There's a great deal of historically accurate information because they're trying to capture what happened in the battle for two reasons. One, they spent a lot of time on lessons learned, just like any other military. But they also wanted to capture what happened in this battle for future generations to portray this is how it happened. This is what we want you to believe in. The issue has evolved. So from the early 90s to now, there was a deliberate policy by Hanoi to use information on American MIAs for political purposes, recognition of the country, get into the UN, a whole host of other things. Over time, as American and United States and Vietnam relations improved, both governments began to look at other things, narcotics control, intellectual property theft. This issue slowly sort of dropped in importance. But then the Vietnamese began to become very much interested in finding their own fallen from the war, they call martyrs. So the U.S. government, depending on which administration is in power and depending upon the Congress, has allocated a lot of money to help Vietnam with 4 areas and what's called war legacy issues, right? And those war legacy issues are Agent Orange, EOD cleanup, disabled people, and then finding, MIAs is kind of at the bottom. But what's happened is that the U.S. government has gone ahead and spent money hiring researchers to research our records to help find the Vietnamese fallen. Whereas if we want the Vietnamese to search their records for our MIAs, they do it half-assed and then hand us a bill. So it is a completely unfair system. But U.S. aid is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to help them build a DNA factory. millions of dollars to clean dioxin, millions of dollars to clean unexploded ordnance, and a host of other things, which you can argue back and forth whether the U.S. government should be doing that or not, whether we're responsible for that or what. But there's a huge imbalance in terms of what we're spending over there.
Do you have a theory or an opinion of what it would take to get them to share everything they know?
I think it's going to take a decision from a very, very high part of the government, probably Politburo level, Central Committee level, for them to say, let's just put this issue behind us. We're going to provide to you everything that we can find in our museums, in our records, about the locations, about our knowledge about a particular MIA. And then we're going to try and help you locate those crash sites, locate those burial sites to the best of our ability.
Of course, these diplomatic realities don't exist in a vacuum. They intersect with other forces of change, like advancing technology and changing priorities.
There have been some pretty amazing advances in DNA. Identifying my dad, it was a tiny bone fragment that was able to yield DNA. And years ago, that bone would not have been able to yield DNA. So the advances that got us to where I can say I'm fully confident that that bone was my father's, that's amazing. But even since then, there have already been additional leaps in the DNA space. Additionally to that, at the latest briefing from DPA in Omaha to the Vietnam War families, we were talking about underwater improvements that have been going on. And we see more work with Vietnamese unilateral teams getting trained by U.S. scientists so that there can be work going on that doesn't require, so we're limited with how many people we can take and how many different sites we get to in a year. So if we can increase pace and scope by having Vietnamese teams who are trained to go in and do some of this. Now I have some questions, of course, on, well, why are they limited to the number of days that our JFAs are limited to if they live there? But that gets into some of the politics about who's doing what between the U.S. and Vietnamese governments and how they're working out the go forward.
Amid all of those colliding realities, given the current rate of positive identifications from the Vietnam War, the likelihood of outcomes like Karen's seems to be diminishing.
Where I find frustration is it still just takes so damn long. And we do know the Vietnamese have information that could help spur new leads. We're running out of time. And where I get frustrated is when I feel like this is some political hot potato and they're our fathers or our brothers, our sons, right?
These realities force difficult questions about different types of closure, what families should expect or hope for, and what they should do in the meantime.
The more information we have, the better, because for some families, just getting a clear understanding of what happened on that fateful day might be the only answer they get, but damn it, it's more than they have now, and we owe it to them.
If there was one thing that you would want listeners who are MIA family members, if there's one thing that you want them to learn from this conversation, what is it?
That you have to take charge of your case. Don't be passive. Don't sit back and wait for the government to do something for you. And learn not only the details of your case, but aspects of the war. Just because Johnny was shot down in a helicopter, well, okay, that's the key piece. But what does it mean? Was it a battle? What units were there? What Vietnamese units were there? What American units were nearby? What was the effort afterwards to try to recover him? So you want to learn all these details so that when you're reading your case scrub, you're able to go, why didn't you guys do this? Why didn't you guys go interview anybody from that unit? How about this? How about that? Because if you just sit there, they're more than happy just to, okay, well, here's what we've done lately. That's about it. Okay, thank you. No, you'll be still waiting 20 years from now.
The story is not over for many families. And even when you get an answer and when your status has been changed on the wall, it doesn't change the way you feel about everything that's happened in your lifetime, right? I mean, a part of you is forever changed because of the Vietnam War and will always be forever changed. And as we continue to grow and change, and there we see the wall change with us too.
We hope the Vietnam Veterans Memorial will continue to change, symbol by symbol. Each diamond that replaces a cross represents both resolution and the persistence of memory. For the 700 crosses that remain, the wall stands as a promise and a reminder that the search continues, even as we acknowledge that not every story will have a satisfying ending. Our thanks to Josh Alvarez and Texas Monthly, whose work inspired this two-part series. If you like really great audio storytelling and/or you want to learn more about Karennie's amazing journey and the people who helped her, head over to Texas Monthly and listen to their podcast, The Final Flight of Captain Forrester. Josh invested 14 months in reporting Karennie's story, and really, it's so good. And of course, we're so grateful to Karennie Forrester and Jay Veit for sharing their perspectives on this important issue. You can learn more about the League of Families and read Jay's report by visiting pow-miafamilies.org. Jay, whose full name is George J. Veit, V-E-I-T-H, is also the author of several books, including Codename Brightlight, The Untold Story of U.S. POW Rescue Efforts During the Vietnam War, and Leave No Man Behind, Bill Bell and the Search for American POW/MIAs from the Vietnam War. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more stories of service, sacrifice, and healing. See you then.